what's going on, internet? Today we're going to change the fork seals on the ZX10. Yeah, should be fun. I've already started, as you see. Front wheels off, brake calipers are off. I don't like to let the brake calipers hang from the brake line. I'll either use some wire and hang them up on something on the bike, or in this case I've got some 4x4s standing up holding the brake calipers. Whatever works. I just don't like to leave them hanging for any kind of extended period of time. So before we get going too far here, I wanted to give a quick shout out, a thank you to Paul. He found me a service manual for a Z1000, which is a very similar bike. It's basically like the naked Street Fighter version of the ZX10. So they shared lots of common pieces and parts. That was super helpful because the Showa big piston forks, I'm spitting on my bike, awesome. They're different than the upright conventional forks on the Gixxer. They're different than my KYB forks. Actually, these upside down KYB forks share more in common with those than these guys. So I needed to know, how to take them apart. I didn't have a service manual. I needed to know, were there any special tools I needed other than what I had? Because I have a fork seal driver, but it's for the KYB forks on the motocross bike, which is a different diameter. So I needed to get a different diameter fork seal driver. There's a couple other special tools I found out that I needed in order to take these forks apart that I don't need for my other motorcycles. So thank you to Paul for that. That was awesome. And then also I found a YouTube channel, Motorcycle Boss, and he has a video on doing exactly what we're going to do here, and that is replacing fork seals on the Showa big piston forks for the same gen ZX10 that this one is, which is 2011 to 2015, Gen 4. So I'm gonna put a link in the description of this video for not just his channel, but the actual video where he's doing the same service on a Gen 4 bike. So, all right, without further ado, let's get into this shit. In order to get the fork tubes off of the motorcycle, we need to, obviously we've removed the brake calipers and the wheel, but there's also a sensor on the left side. And then the front fender needs to come off. I think there's just 2 bolts on one side and 2 bolts on the other side. That should come out, and then we'll be able to ready. Yeah, we'll be able to ready, man. That's normal English. We'll be able to loosen up the triple clamps and pull the fork tubes down and out of the bike. And hopefully I've got enough clearance, I hope. Hopefully I got enough clearance between this pit bull stand and the fork tubes. Hopefully I've got enough clearance vertically as well. We'll see. We'll find out. Never done this before in the ZX10. Getting the fender out between the stand and the forks. But one thing that you can do is you can twist the inner tube. See how the tube is just kind of moving inside of the outer tube? So you can twist these to get the mounting brackets out of the way, and then it makes it easier to pull the fender out. And then you kind of have to play Tetris a little bit to fit everything through here. One thing that's kind of bothersome is the brake line hook right here. That kind of gets in the way trying to pull the fender out. The other thing I'm noticing is the bolt is an Allen head, so I can probably just use my ratchet and an Allen key socket. And then the problem is I don't think there's a lot of room here. So what I think we can do though is loosen, well, I can't see it. You can see this one over here on this side. Loosen the clip-on, and then what we can do over here is when we loosen this clip-on, it's right here, we can actually probably just turn the clip-on this way to make more room, or maybe turn it the other way, whichever way gives us room. That's what I'm going to try and do. That way you don't have to take off the mounting bracket for the master cylinder and just kind of move things around. I think if I can just rotate the clip-on, I'll be good. You're gonna wanna loosen the fork cap before you remove the fork
from the motorcycle. I forgot in this instance, and so I shoved the fork back into the triple clamps. I ended up using the upper triple clamp just because it's easier access to the pinch bolt. And then you just want to break loose the fork cap. Normally, you're going to want to break loose the fork cap after you loosen the upper triple clamp. The lower triple clamp will keep the fork from turning, allowing you to break the cap loose. You just want to break the cap loose before you remove the fork from the motorcycle. With the fork cap loose, you can go ahead and thread it out of the outer tube. There's not going to be any spring pressure behind it, so you don't have to worry about it popping up or anything like that. There is a lock nut. And so you're going to need, I think I used a 17 millimeter on the lock nut and then a 19 millimeter on the fork cap. You need to break those loose. And then you can remove the fork cap, and then underneath the fork cap is your compression and rebound dampening rods. You can pull those guys out. The next thing we're going to remove is the piston rod guide. There's going to be a little bit of oil on the top side of the piston rod guide. We're going to drain that now. And there's going to be a lot more oil on the bottom side of the piston rod guide. So once we take the piston rod guide out of the fork, we're going to drain more fork fluid out. But for now, we're just going to drain what's on the top side, which should just be a little bit. Now, if you've never taken your forks apart or if they've never been serviced, the piston rod guide is torqued in there really super tight. So I'm using a vise on the bottom of the fork to hold it from turning. And I've got a really large crescent wrench using our new special tool to remove the piston rod guide. And then on the large crescent wrench, I have another box end wrench that fits over the crescent wrench that just gives me extra leverage. If you have like a floor jack handle or some other kind of piece of pipe that'll fit over the crescent wrench, that'll work as well. And if you don't have a vise, you're going to need at least another set of hands to try and hold the bottom of the fork. The piston rod guide is torqued in there that tight. Once you break loose the piston rod guide, go ahead and thread that guy out. There will be some spring pressure underneath it, so just watch out for that. It's going to want to pop up once you get off that last thread. And then once you pull the piston rod guide out, you should be able to then remove the piston rod itself. And then underneath that is a plastic container, not a container, it's like a little guide basically. And then underneath that is the main spring, which sits on top of like a little dowel pin basically. You can pull all that stuff out, and my advice would be to leave the fork upside down for a period of time and let it really just drain as much of the old fluid out as possible.
Next step is to pop up the dust seal. We use a little screwdriver. I've already done it. I'm going to bring it all the way to the top here, or actually the bottom of the fork. Inside is a retaining clip that holds in our oil seal. So we'll pop that out with a little screwdriver, and then we'll pop the oil seal out, and we'll be able to separate the inner tube from the outer tube.
This next step doesn't feel intuitive at all. It actually feels like you're breaking something, but every fork I've ever worked on, whether they were Showas or KYBs, motocross, street, upside down, upright, it doesn't matter. They all kind of come apart the same way. Once you pull that little retaining clip off the top of the oil seal, then you just simply pull the two tubes apart until they break free, and then you get what we're at right now. The bottommost shim is actually sitting in a little recessed area of the tube, and it's pretty tough to get out without using a screwdriver to spread the shim apart, and then you can pull it over the top of the rest of the tube and down and off. And you'll see that I kind of lay things out in exactly the way they come off the tube so that I can put them back in the same order. The best way to actually install your dust seal and your new dust seal and your new oil seal is to take like some saran wrap the inner tube where you're going to slide the dust seal and the oil seal over the top. And that's because there's a bunch of different edges that both the dust seal and the oil seal have to cross over, and it's possible that you can damage your oil seal as you're moving it across those different edges. So if you wrap some saran wrap around those edges, put maybe a little bit of oil or a little bit of grease, they'll slide onto the fork tube a lot easier and it's a lot safer. I didn't do it in this one because I'm a loser. I probably wouldn't recommend. You just got to be careful, but essentially there's the flat washer and then there's the middle shim. That shim needs to sit inside the outer tube and it doesn't want to slide in there nice and easy. So you've got to exert some pressure, and what would be really nice if you had something like a seal driver, but the seal driver, you can't really use it for this because it doesn't fit, it's not tall enough. So I let the washer sit on top of that copper-like shim and then use a screwdriver, flat tip screwdriver and a hammer and just kind of gently work my way around 360 degrees until I get that to seat all the way inside the outer tube, and then we'll be able to drive the seal in, put the ring back on, the retaining clip, put the dust seal, add fluid, so on and so forth. All right, next is we actually take our oil seal driver, which is an adjustable oil seal driver, so it fits a range of different size fork tubes. And the main thing here is to make sure that the oil seal driver is actually touching the outermost edge of the oil seal. That's where the seal is got a hard surface. If you're too far towards the center of the seal or really close to the inner tube, you can actually damage the seal. The seal is really soft at that point. That's where it's actually going to seal oil from leaking out. So you want to just make sure that your oil seal driver is either the exact size for your application, or if you have an adjustable oil seal driver like I do here, just need to make sure that's adjusted properly so it's touching the outermost edge of the oil seal. Basically, you want the oil seal driver closer to the outer tube than you do the inner tube, if that makes any sense. So what I'm doing right here is checking if the oil seal has been driven down deep enough into the outer tube. And there's two ways you can tell. One, the sound that the oil seal driver will make when the oil seal actually bottoms out is kind of like more like a solid thud, almost like you're looking for studs behind sheetrock, right? Two, the retaining clip sits in a depression in the outer seal. So once that's visible and you can see it 360 degrees, then you're usually pretty safe at that point to go ahead and drop the retaining clip in. And as long as that retaining clip sits inside that area in the outer tube, then you're good to go. And you can drop down the dust seal and flip the fork around and start adding oil.
All right, now that we've got the seals installed, the next thing we're gonna do is put things back in reverse order. So we've got our spring and this kind of centering thingamabob, like a dowel almost. We're gonna drop that inside. And then we'll take this little spacer, large diameter in first, small diameter. You'll be facing towards this compression rod piston thing right here, right? So it's gonna go in like that, but we're not gonna put in piston just yet. I'm gonna drop this guy in. All right, now that we've got the spring and that little spacer with the smaller diameter side facing up towards where the piston will eventually go, but before we put the piston in, we wanna add our fork oil. The service manual that I have is actually for a Z1000, not the ZX10. The Z1000 is a very similar bike. It's kind of like a naked Street Fighter version of the ZX10. That service manual says 14.5 ounces. If you're doing just a fluid change, 17 ounces of fluid. If you are doing a complete reassemble, kind of like what we did essentially, where we've completely disassembled it and put new fork seals in. But we're gonna start off with 14.5 ounces because I think it's always easier to just add more rather than to try and take away. I don't have that handy dandy fork oil tool that you can kind of preset the height and then it just pulls out, and then once you start sucking air, you know you're at the right height. I don't have that cool little tool, so we're just gonna have to use a tape measure, add a little bit more tape measure, add a little bit more tape measure until we get it to the right height. But we'll start off initially just dumping in 14.5 ounces of fluid. Bring Sally up, bring Sally down, let's done start. So at this point, the fork is fully assembled. We've got the piston assembly, the damping rods that kind of slide down the center of this guy, cap obviously, and the piston rod assembly guide is in there, and there's no way I was going to torque that back down to whatever insane torque they had on there from the factory, because that was a monster to get off. So the last thing we need to do is just measure off our fork fluid. I don't have one of those really super nice fork measuring tools with the syringe and the tube, and you can preset the height, and it's a nice tool, but I don't have one. So what we're going to do is we're going to top off the fluid, then we're going to measure, and we're top it off, measure until we get to the right height. And the right height, what we're shooting for is 3 inches from the top, or 77 millimeters. And then there's a plus or minus, like fudge factor, 2 millimeters, or like 3/100ths of an inch. Hopefully the battery doesn't die on me. All right, we're gonna measure it off. Let's see, I'm gonna set this right at 3. All right, that's pretty darn close, man. Last thing I'll leave you with is we're gonna, as I'm just screwing the fork cap in with my hand, we're not gonna torque it down, and you don't need to put a lot of pressure on this, because remember, your clip-on and your upper triple clamp are going to clamp around the top of it, so you don't need to like torque this down to any kind of crazy spec. You just need to tighten it up, but you don't want to do that until you get on the bike. So we're going to slide this into the lower and upper triple clamps and the clip-on, and then we're going to torque down the lower triple clamp, which is going to torque on about right here. Once that is torqued down, that's going to be enough to hold the fork from turning, and then we'll take our cap tool, our special tool, and then we'll tighten this down. Again, I'm not going to torque it down real hard, because after we tighten this down, we'll torque down the upper triple clamp and the clip-on, which will keep this locked in and keep this from coming loose. That's it. We're done. We're just going to put it back on the bike and do everything I just said. So. And there's absolutely no sense in me filming the second fork leg, because it's all the same. So hopefully this video will help you, inspire you to work on your bike. You do need some special tools with this. I think I've got 3 special tools. This is the fork cap special tool that I ordered from, oh gosh, what's his channel's name? The Motorcycle Boss. He's got affiliate links. You can get all these tools right from his channel. And this is the piston assembly guide special tool. So that crazy tight guide that fits in here, it basically threads in. It's got really, really tight metric threads. And then our adjustable fork seal tool. This is pretty handy because I've got three motorcycles, more than that if you count my kids' bikes. I've got 3 motorcycles, and all of them have different fork sizes, so having an adjustable fork seal driver is really nice. So, and now I can say I've done fork seals on all 3 of those bikes. So cool. I will definitely make use of that special tool. The last special tool that I haven't mentioned in the video till now is this guy. So it's got a number of different sizes, and this is what I use to actually remove the axle off the front wheel. I don't know. I think I got that from Revzilla or one of those sites. Anyway, we're done. Hope you guys liked the video, and don't be afraid to work on your bike. This wasn't that big of a deal. Like I said, you need those special tools to do it right. Take your time. It's not that hard. You can do it. You can do it. All right. Till the next time, guys, keep the rubber side down, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye.